get classes quiet by doing that here. I do this. Can you do this? And then I explain what it means, all right? This means several things. It comes, of course, from Star Trek, right? Who introduced this into Star Trek? Leonard Nimoy. Where did Leonard Nimoy get it? He got it at the synagogue, the same synagogue my Uncle Boris goes through in Los Angeles. It is used on Yom Kippur, the most holy day, when you're repenting and all that and thinking about what a jerk you've been all year. And a member of the priestly caste has to do this. That's a Kohen, the plural Kohanim. Someone asked the last name Cohen is probably Kohen. They have to do this in front of the ark, okay? Now, the interesting thing is that Leonard Nimoy, yes, introduced it into Star Trek from the synagogue, and of course Leonard Nimoy is Jewish. So is William Shatner, Captain Kirk, okay? In fact, my daughter, who is also Jewish, says that for her, Star Trek is Jews in space. Okay? The other thing this means, and this is my hypothesis, some of you can do this, some of you can't. The ones who can do it have probably played the piano, because there you practice double thirds. I think there's a positive but not exact correlation. That's usually all people remember from my presentations. Okay, it's Q&A time, and I have a constraint on questions. The first question has to be friendly. I said that once at a University of California campus, and 3 hands went down immediately. They all wanted to ask about phonics. All right. Yes?
That's a really meaty one, I guess. We focus so much on, like in high school English particularly, I think, and maybe in all of the levels, on teaching literacy. But when we're talking about acquiring languages, all people can acquire languages, but literacy is not something that all achieve equal fluency in. So should we be focusing on literacy?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I strongly disagree with the idea that not everyone can get literacy. Everyone gets it if the conditions are right. Ken Goodman, one of the founders of the whole language movement, said learning to read is natural. Everything we have done says he's right. Frank Smith is right. It's the same process. Comprehensible input. Smith is right. Goodman is right. When you say you learn to read by reading, you learn to read by understanding what's on the page. When you do that, you absorb the phonics system. Phonics cannot be learned. The only part of phonics that can be consciously learned is about 5%. That's initial consonants. Well, and not even all consonants. It's all got to be initial consonants. Not even all consonants are easy to. The rules are extremely complicated for everything in phonics, and scientists haven't worked out all the rules yet. They can't. It's the same argument that I have for syntactic theory. I've been playing with this one lately, using it as an example. For example, this word, bomb, this is pronounced B, right? How is this one pronounced? Silent. What's the rule? Does anybody know the rule? No. If it comes after M, it's silent. Yes, thumb, bomb, etc. But what about bombing? Okay. There's exceptions. Climber, climbing, etc. Sometimes it depends on what it's followed by. It's followed by a grammatical suffix. It's different. If it's followed by something else, it's different. I can't even keep them straight. The rules are so complicated. What you think are ordinary rules are very, very difficult. Phonics cannot be consciously taught. Do it. You can only do a few. And kids who get phonics rules, and lots of them, don't remember them very well. They do better, though, on tests in pronounce words out loud, given in isolation. It does not have any impact on tests of reading comprehension. We have known this for decades. The National Reading Panel came out in the year 2000, which they phonics is right. Not just that, but systematic, intensive phonics over the years for everybody. In that document, 600-odd pages, an obscure professor named Elaine Guerin from Fresno actually read it. She's actually And she said right there, inside, she pointed out to everyone, tests that are reading alone, phonics makes no contribution. It only helps on tests given to little kids where words are presented in a list and you pronounce them out loud. The whole phonics thing falls apart. Studies, when you look at countries where there's lots of illiteracy, it's because there's very little to read around. When there's lots of stuff to read and it's reasonably interesting, everybody gets literate. Countries like, the Scandinavian countries, wealthy areas of the United States, 99.9% literacy. That means it's innate and inevitable if books are there.
Like I'm sorry, my mind is like exploding right now.
There you go.
My dad is like an extremely illiterate person, but he's extremely bright, and he does not speak as one who was illiterate. But I don't know why it didn't occur to me before that premise was not correct. That it's like, well, maybe he just didn't read a lot when he was growing up. Like we kind of take for granted that you read and write and speak. In school he just wasn't good at it, but probably he wasn't doing a lot of it at home. And
that's it. The trick is usually, the breakthrough is usually comic books.
Or it becomes a stressful, like my brother isn't super literate, probably because it was like there was a lot of pressure. He was stressed out about it, so he didn't want to do it because it was.
I have a special section of my website on phonics and literacy, and that's where I present all the arguments. But I'll just give you one or two of them. A study done by Rosalie Fink, a professor in New York, brilliant. She looked at people, adults, who were highly literate. One was a Nobel Prize winner, all had published things, all that. They were all considered to be dyslexic when they were in school. They didn't learn to read in general until around age 10 or 11. One of them didn't learn to read till senior year of high school. They learned to read when they got interested in reading something that was important to them. And then it simply exploded in every single case. The phonics people, the last thing they will ever try is finding out what kids are interested in and giving them comprehensible things to read. Yeah, the old phonics argument has raised its head again. We went through this, read all that stuff, and put an article in the New York Times saying they're not, and they're terrible, teachers aren't learning all these rules. The New York Times published it, went viral. I wrote a letter, didn't get it. I sent it to the author, didn't get much reaction. Then PBS did a special. I objected to that too, of course, wrote things, and now the whole phonics thing is hit again, and it's most unfortunate. The whole phonics movement, when the people in charge of it, Emily Hensford has written about it, research at all. They just claim everybody knows this is true, and they all have this belief that learning to read is not natural, but it is. At least that's my hypothesis. Okay, anything else?
Can you talk a little bit about comprehensible input, the idea that you have input that's slightly beyond the full understanding of the student, and transparent input, which is an approach that some are using where unknown target language word is immediately translated into the native language so that it's immediately available. How does that play a role, or does it, in language acquisition? Is it a good thing, bad thing?
Great question. Good questions are those I'm prepared to answer, where I have a set canned answer to. All right, first of all, I+1.
Yes.
The important thing about I+1, if you give people a lot of input, it's there. You don't have to go out of your way to put it in. You don't have to aim at I+1. It's there. If you aim at I+1, you get very boring text. And that's what we always do. We try to guess in advance. You can't do it because we don't know what the natural order is. We only have a handful of data, enough to have a decent hypothesis, but we can't program in the event exactly in the order. Number two, it doesn't have to be transparent. The text itself contains enough context for you to gradually build up the meaning. If not, it's the wrong text. And again, there's Benico's method, a version, I would say, of transparent, but very much easier. When telling a story, if there's a word you think they won't know, she draws a picture, it'll translate it, but doesn't expect them to remember it. It's that little 5%. So I think the transparent movement, as you describe it, is unnecessary. And it's unnecessary to identify in advance which words. That's the way we all acquired language. No one has ever done it any differently. We've never had the sequence worked out for us one at a time, etc. And it's happening in this talk. The talks I've given today, there has been enough comprehensible input so you could follow along. Different people get different things. Some of you may have gotten some insight here, some there, some here. And that's the way learning happens. There's no sequence. I didn't say, here's my objectives. Here's the things I want everybody to know by the end of the day. Instead, I give a talk that I hope is going to be reasonably interesting and comprehensible to everyone here, knowing everyone's getting different things. I+1 is different for everyone in the room. That's how education works. Algo más.
I've heard you say that you like, I'll call it a grammar pop-up, that might not be the term that you use, but the idea that in the context of instruction, maybe there's a little tiny bit about, did you see how this thing works here, or that kind of thing? And I wanted, it sounds like you're confirming that's okay with you.
Yes, if it's not okay with me, I will forbid you from doing it. No.
No, but I have a follow-up, but and what do you think that does for the learners?
Okay, pop-up grammar, term invented by Blaine Ray, I think, or one of his people, is an idea of occasionally pausing and saying something about grammatical rule, okay? So when I first started watching lessons with stories, teacher, like, I saw Jason Fritz do this, of course, where he'd say, oh, by the way, this little O at the end means past tense. Here, that's all. You can take it or leave it. You don't have to pay attention. It works, it's okay, because sometimes a little grammar will make things more comprehensible. It's like a translation. Fine. You're going to forget it, but it does set it in the past tense, etc. It also is a little bit of linguistics, which has its own value. Telling people this is how the language works. Some people may think, people like me, think this is the most interesting thing possible. Normal people will just forget it and go on with their lives. The pop-up lessons, the beauty of them is they take 5 seconds. It's no big deal. I remember when Linda did this, Linda Lee, my first Mandarin teacher. She was giving us a lesson, and she said, oh, by the way, switched into English, we don't have infinitives in Chinese, you just string them along. I thought that was fascinating, but irrelevant to most people there, but a nice little extra, took 4 seconds. So that's fine. It teaches a little linguistics and can occasionally make input a little more comprehensible, not forbidden.
This isn't language, but it's something that always kind of has bothered me. When we talk about something just in English, we talk about like successful people. We usually, that comes down to rich or powerful or celebrated or something like that. But I just always thought when we talk about that, like, we almost talk about like when you get one of those things, you become celebrated or rich or famous or whatever, you are successful and this is a permanent thing. So I was just wondering, when was the last time maybe in work when you felt like, man, this was a failure, or you felt like you had failed at something? I just think that's something we don't usually ask successful people.
Let me quote one of my son's math professors, a guy named John Tate, University of Texas, where my son went to grad school. He's the real Dr. Krashen, by the way. A poor imitation, let me tell you, in all ways. Anyway, Tate was one of the top algebraicists of the country, no question, international reputation. Someone once asked him, how do you spend your day? Word. He says, well, about a third of the time I'm making good progress. Another third of the time I'm making mistakes. Another third of the time I'm wondering, how could I be so stupid? I feel that way every day, all day long. These things emerge so slowly. Like this idea about optimal input, and that's the mark of a fast learner, someone gifted. That took a week of trying it out, going back until, oh, that's it. How could I have been so stupid? The reason I do better than most people is that I expect that. I asked Frank Smith what his secret of success was. He says, I'm literate. That's what he meant. He knows there's a composing process. He knows it takes time. Creativity requires incubation. You're going to make lots of mistakes. Keep working. It'll gradually work itself out, draft after draft. So I feel that way constantly. And alone, I am not the public persona at all. I'm doing the same everyday work that I did when I was 12 years old in school, same thing. And the work is great.
I was looking and thinking about, compelling and comprehensible input, the I+1, and in my classroom every day, I have somewhere between 32 and 42 students in my classroom.
Good.
And that
It's not good, but
proficiency
thanks
rate-
for asking that.
Yes, but I mean, as a practical teacher, and you're talking about, students as your curriculum, but when you have students who are true novice lows or transfers from out of district,
Right.
they are freshmen, so they get dropped into the middle of quarter 3 Spanish 1 class, or whatever that circumstance is, because of their age, they're placed
Yes.
in an age-appropriate class, and so you have anywhere from brand new novices to maybe emerging, pushing into intermediate range. Do you have suggestions for us as loving, welcoming, engaging professionals to address that?
Well, I'm going to first use your question to my own selfish advantage and say this is another example why you cannot aim at I+1, because everybody's different. They're at different places, especially in language. It's hard enough to do this with algebra, but with language, we would never take advanced algebra, trigonometry, calculus, and long division in the same class. In language, they do it to us all the time, so it's outrageous. But it's hard enough even doing it in a uniform math class, because kids go at different rates. All you can do in a class like that is give input that is reasonably comprehensible to a lot of kids, knowing they're not going to get everything, there's going to be noise, but if you can keep them reasonably attentive, you're doing great. That's why I like sustained silent reading, because it's individualized. Okay, and finding stories and stuff that are interesting, comprehensible, and wonderful for everyone in the class is overwhelmingly difficult. And all I can say is, I understand it, you understand it, everyone in this room understands it. Someday the administrators will understand it.
Sounds like you're promoting that we forgive ourselves a little bit too, because
Yes.
I can't speak for everybody, but I know I constantly tell my kids, it's progress, not perfection. Give me one more than you did yesterday when you got this.
Right.
more.
Right, exactly. Progress, not perfection, because we'll never make perfection anyway. Same thing with me. It's a very nonlinear up and down path all the time. Good therapy session, yes.
My question background first, because I don't want to sound stupid.
But you will anyway. By the time I get through with you, I'll reduce you to tears. That's my job. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm going to be teaching teachers in Ecuador who typically are not fluent and often don't know English to teach English. Do you need to speak a language to be able to teach it?
Pretty well. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect, though.
Okay.
If you can tell stories and get them into interesting books, you can get a lot done.
Okay.
Yeah, you should. The best thing you can do for them is encourage them to get a reading habit and find some easy books for them to read so they can improve their English.
Okay. So just
Yes.
try to convince them to improve their English.
Well, that will never work. But if you get books that they want to read, they will improve whether
Okay.
they want to or not. Yeah, exactly.
Suggested doing stuff,
Bringing a ton of
like cooking something.
Yeah, I know.
baggage fees.
I wonder about that now. Yes, you'll get comprehensible input. Yes, it will be great. It'll be fun. For example, if I were teaching, say, a music class, whose kids, I'd have everyone either learn to play the ukulele or the recorder and gossip about music, go over the words to songs, what they mean, why they are poetry, why they're beautiful, etc. Older kids, I talk about music history, how Gershwin and Ravel were buddies and hung out. I went to music school, I know all this stuff. So I'd make it interesting as much as I can. My model for this is Harry Potter, the potions class, which was fabulous pedagogy. You go into potions class and you make a potion and you see if it works. And you understand magic, you get the terminology, etc. The failure was Defense Against the Dark Arts when, what's her name, took over Hogwarts. Yeah, Umbridge, yes. And Harry, in the old days, originally Defense Against the Dark Arts was the original applied class where you learned everything. And if it didn't, you were in trouble, okay? Then she took over, Umbridge took over, and it became a standard class. And Harry organized a renegade underground defense against the dark arts, you remember. And the principal found out, said, you can't do that. And he says, yeah, but we've got to do something. All we're doing in these classes is preparing kids for tests. What about the real world? Remember what she said? Harry, there is no real world. There's only tests. That's what we're up against. But in these classes, as wonderful as they can be, still you're going to get richer comprehensible input from stories and reading for pleasure. So it's kind of a less rich version. It has its advantages. You don't have to be, high octane gas every step of the way, and they will get stuff from it, but you won't get the rapid stuff you would from listening to stories and reading.
Can you talk a little bit about Stories First? You have this link on your website,
Yeah.
Stories First Foundation, and
This-
how they go about.
The Stories First Foundation is basically based on the work of Benico Mason, whose method of teaching is, for beginning classes, is 100% stories, nothing else. She does it, her particular way is based on Grimm, because it's universal interest, but you don't have to do it on Grimm, it's any story will work. She finds a story known by experience to be of interest to this group of students, basically tells the story in the second language. She's a good artist, that helps. And she draws pictures to illustrate it, okay, or will explain it. Like, once upon a time, a long time ago, 200 years, 300 years, paraphrase, things that you guys do all the time. And the stories always have very interesting endings, etc. Instead of going over the vocabulary afterwards, she tells another story, and another one, and another one. People love stories. That is the class. And the results she's getting she's found it's more efficient in terms of words learned per hour than formal instruction in vocabulary. And the kids easily move to reading because the stories themselves become the first text. So they've had a good start in it. If you go to storiesfirst.org, you will find demos. You'll find Benico, you'll find all of our friends telling stories that you can watch. And we have a little section on written stories in our beginning things to get more text. There's only one story in Mandarin. You seen the one I wrote? You seen my story?
I thought there were a few actually, but it's been a while since I've checked.
Oh, maybe I haven't checked. I thought mine was the only one. I'm glad to hear. It's the one about Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse?
Yeah, I think so. And Goofy, right?
Right. I wrote one story in Mandarin. I'll recite it to you. This is the level of complexity. Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. Are they married? Are they boyfriend-girlfriend? Are they brothers and sisters? Nobody knows. You could do the same thing with Daisy and Donald. Then I said, Donald Duck has 3 nephews. Where's their mother? Where's their father? Okay. Then Goofy and Pluto are dogs. They're both dogs. Goofy can talk. Pluto can't talk. What's going on? So it's at that level. My feeling from Benico's work, largely inspired by it, we want a massive amount of extremely interesting and easy input, tons of it. We go much too quickly to hard input. That's been our story in language acquisition. She has her kids read graded readers for 2-3 years before they really, feel good enough about it. And it works. With stories, you want them to be easy, and a lot of them, easy reading. That's easy listening. That's the key to success. We've overestimated how fast kids can go. That's what we want.
Next year, I'll be student teaching in an ESL classroom, and with the high school, because there's so many students that are ready to graduate from a program but don't have that academic language, they're creating a classroom just for the academic language. So would there be a better time to introduce it before having it individualized?
Let me talk about academic language. Thank you for bringing that up. The current thing is that we teach general, and then you can go on to academic language. In English, academic language is big business. The current way of doing it, which has been prevalent the last 30 years, some scholar describes the academic language. Here's a list of the vocabulary of chemistry, and you're supposed to learn that. Here's the grammar used in science, more passive voice, etc. So you study that. That's never worked. It's never really been thoroughly tried. It's just nonsense. It's just castles in the sky, okay? Instead, the argument we've made, Jeff McQuillan has made this argument, I have too, that reading gives you all the academic language you need. Even reading fiction gives you this language. Jeff has looked at regular popular fiction, has compared what's there to the lists of academic words that are required. There's a lot there that you get. A study came out last year, I think, of kids who read, native speakers who read science fiction. If you read 1 million words of science fiction, that's like a year's reading for, a high school student. You get most of the words on the science academic word list. How about that? That's where we've all gotten it. I'll give you a case history to make the point. The data I have is for native speakers, okay? And I'm extrapolating to second language. By the way, if you want to learn, if you're getting ready to go to law school, read all of John Grisham's novels. You'll have all the vocabulary of law. It'll all be there. It'll all be in context. You'll get it all. That's worth a year of law school. Anyway, I should interrupt myself, when I'm doing this. So find another idea. What was I saying?
Something about finding all the scientific stuff. Oh, a study. Native speakers.
Native speaker studies, extrapolating from native speaker studies. Oh, yes, I was going to give you a case history. A native speaker case history. This one is 300 years old, and it's the case history of Michael Faraday. Those of you who've studied science, you know who Michael Faraday is. He was the greatest chemist of his time. He performed the marriage of chemistry and physics, basically. Discovered electromagnetism. He laid the path, the groundwork for Maxwell's equations, which was the foundation of relativity. Einstein had Faraday's picture on the wall and Maxwell's picture as well. Faraday dropped out of school when he was 12 years old. The family had to send him to work. There was heavy poverty in London. He went to work for a bookbinder because the family needed the money. The bookbinder was a wonderful person who did something that helped all of us. He said, Michael, while you're here, I want you to bind all the books together, glue them, but take some time off, read some of them. The bookbinder also had a small bookstore, so Michael Faraday had access to more books than anyone in London at the time. He spent the next 8 years, yes, binding books, but hours a day with the permission of his boss, reading what he wanted to read. He read fiction, he read nonfiction. Everything he knew about the world was from reading. It was from reading that he decided after a while he wanted to be a scientist. When he was 20, he got himself apprenticed to a chemist in London who was a researcher. 3 years later, he published his first paper. After that, he went on to know more about chemistry and physics than anyone who lived at the time. Michael Faraday never studied. Michael Faraday never took a test. For people who think this is necessary. Instead, he did the two things I think are the foundation of everything. He read for pleasure, and that helped him discover his interests, and he tried to solve problems in an area of interest to him. This is the environment I want to create for these kids to get scientific vocabulary. My task in a class like that is to get them excited about science and read science fiction. I would start with science fiction and graded readers. Going back to Jules Verne, any science fiction you can find their niche, and that's where they'll get scientific vocabulary. If you want them to get the special vocabulary of historical scholarship, they should read historical fiction and a lot of it. That's where it comes from. That's what needs to happen in these classes. They'll find out what their interests are, not just memorize terms and vocabulary and grammatical constructions, but they'll absorb all that, and at the same time, they'll begin to understand what they want to do with their lives. That class in academics is to help them figure out what they want to be in academics, so they get excited and read about it. It's called Zukunftsmusik, wishful thinking, right? Yes. Yes.
Between hearing the language and reading, which do you think, does one have more of an effect on acquisition than the other? Or?
I really don't know. I really don't know. We've been playing around with it, making hypotheses, which is all you can do, because no study's ever been done. The research on listening has not gone very far. They look at things like, should you just listen or should you read at the same time? You know, which I think is not a very interesting question, because people discover which one they like best, all that. It's kind of boring doing both anyway. My hunch is that listening is a powerful help. And we wrote an article a couple of years ago about guided listening, about listening programs, where you could listen to lots of stuff. The materials aren't there yet. We have it for native speakers, books on tape, etc., and they're wonderful. I think a lot of native speakers have gotten literate doing things like this, and acknowledge, and especially when you drive long distances, you know, listening to stories. This is the growth industry, I think, for second language. Easy stories to listen to, moving on till you can do the native ones. I think it's a wide open question. My hunch is that it's going to work. Is that the more you listen, the better you'll get, and the more you'll want to read. So I'm betting that it's going to work. Don't have hard data yet, but it's a good area to work on. When are we supposed to leave? Don't we have another? We have till 6:30?
6:15.
Okay, 5 more minutes. Okay, yes.
I'm asking this for a teacher friend, but we wanted to know what were your thoughts on one-to-one computing in schools?
One-to-one what? Computers.
All
In other words, what are thoughts on using computers?
All students having their own computer.
Oh, okay. The question is, what about technology, really? I am in awe of GPSs. I use the GPS to find the bathroom when I get up in the middle of the night. Okay, that's how fantastic I think they are. Frank Smith said, computers are one of the best things that has ever happened to the human race. They're one of the worst things that has ever happened to schools. I think that's pretty darn close to the truth. They've been an absolute disaster in, I think, 80 to 90% of the applications, because it's so easy to make money on them. We spend billions on these machines and don't put books in the library, etc. But let's go case by case. What about e-readers, books, you know, reading books on computers, etc.? I don't do it. I do it with scientific papers because I have no choice, but generally I download. I think that's just a personal preference, because the e-books are getting better all the time. Gradually, you can do things on e-books you can do in regular books, and the advantages are enormous. You can put 300 books, you know, on your little machine. You can take it anywhere. So I think the future is bright if they calm down and stop trying to push things on us and simply let it evolve. Also, there are scientific things you can describe on computers that you can't do in real life, experiments, simulations. So there are isolated areas where it looks really promising, but they're making it for everything. We now have we have libraries that have no books, that are simply computers, etc., which I think is a disgrace. Okay, we're pushing it much too hard. So I would do it case by case basis. Is this something that human beings cannot do? Yes. Don't use computers for things that we don't need, that we can do already. That's the point. And I think all of us independently have discovered this in our lives. We only use computers for things we can't do in any other way. And that's what schools need to do.
What about using computers to aid in learning languages, like finding, let's say, Martina Beck, for instance, is creating a new Garbanzo website to accompany her material so that students get extra practice on, you know, concepts. And I don't know that much about her website yet because I didn't get chosen to field test it, but what about that? What about
Well, I can't comment.
listening
Yeah.
activities?
Yeah.
Say native speakers at the University of Texas, I think it's Austin, and then there's one other one, has a lot of recordings of native speakers speaking about families and habits, et cetera. all
That
different
sounds
topics.
wonderful to me. Using computers for things we can't do as a library, for listening stuff that you can't find elsewhere, that's an obvious winner as far as I'm concerned. It's a repository. It's a library. I've recommended, for example, that heritage language classes, so your students are native speakers, you want them to enrich their Spanish, keep it going. They go home as part of I like them to read novellas, I think that'd be interesting, and discuss the implications. But also recording your family members, your uncle who's had these great adventures, the stories, making sure they're there for everyone. What an obvious place to do, put them on a website. I think it's wonderful. But those are things that you can't do any other way, that human beings can't do. That's where it's important. So I'm a big fan of that stuff.
So when, for instance, Spanish, toward the end of Spanish 1 or Spanish 2, they can listen to native speakers talking about, in simple, because they'll have them at different levels so that a student can.
Okay, if it's interesting and comprehensible, compelling, I'm for it. If it's simply a planned dialogue. Did you know that Bill Van Patten did a whole novel in Spanish, a whole drama? Forgot the name of it. It was good. It was great. He was years before his time. No surprise with him. It's great. Good dramas, good plays, movies that are comprehensible for low-level students, good stories, in other words. I would be watching it. I would be listening to it. Bill was the pioneer. I thought it was a great idea. That we need more of. That's something we can't do any other way. So yes, do it. But if it's, a drill to make sure you got the present perfect, no.
Focus on comprehensibility, like a lot of teachers, like they keep in mind L1 of the students they're teaching, and they may produce like utterances that are non-native, like using pronouns when they're not necessary, or using a cognate when that may not be like the most natural way that.
These are students talking.
Like a teacher providing input.
Oh, teacher input.
Yeah, with teacher providing input, like we tend to try to use things like, yes, this may be what more native speakers would use, but this is a cognate that you could take advantage of that's going to make it more comprehensive.
Oh, when they deliberately alter the language and make it this artificial thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
so is it better to have the breadth where they have exposure to a lot of words that a native speaker will understand, and it's comprehensible, or for it be more limited and you make it comprehensible, but they're not getting exposed to
Okay.
the language?
I'll give you a radical view so that anyone with any opinion will disagree with me. I'm good at that. I wouldn't even discuss it. I would leave it alone. If some teachers do it, okay. Some teachers don't. I wouldn't monitor them. I wouldn't forbid it. I wouldn't encourage it. Here's why. It doesn't matter so much what kids get in beginning Spanish. The goal of beginning Spanish is to make more advanced Spanish more comprehensible. They're going to hear more Spanish. It's going to work itself out. If it's deviant, they're not going to use it. They won't hear it again, so it'll go away. It'll disappear. Your goal in beginning language class is to make students an intermediate, so they can have conversations with cooperative native speakers who will slow down, etc., and they can read some authentic things in Spanish. If they do that, they're going to continue to improve, and the little quirks that they may pick up in class, they're going to disappear. So another non-problem, I think.
Just one quick little thing. What are your thoughts on, are you behind I can't remember who I've heard this, but it's kind of spoken a lot, the idea of you shelter vocabulary but not grammar.
I've never quite understood that.
I think the idea is
Yeah.
limiting the amount of new range of vocabulary, like try to stick
Okay,
more frequent
easy answer.
grammar,
Easy
whatever.
answer. Make input comprehensible.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. Wow. Okay, we did it. Wonderful. Thank you. Oh, I have a joke. What's the first sentence you should learn in another language? Mi amigo va pagar. Dos cervezas, por favor. Mi amigo va pagar. Mein Freund wird bezahlen.
Do you know about language dancing?
No.
Well, I love
What
this concept. I'll print that out. You can have that.